So I'm trying a little bit of an experiment right now as I work on a much bigger takedown of the spending bill that's in front of the Senate right now. HR 1 that just came through the House, that's sitting in front of the Senate, that is going to be, in some way, shape, or form in the way that it is now, be codified into law and become the budget of the United States. So it's going to impact everything that we do over the next few years. So it's really important, obviously, to get that right and to be really detailed. And because the videos that I do on the channel tend to be a lot longer and more involved, I thought I would take a different approach to this one and sort of work it out in real time with you to give you an idea of what I'm looking at and kind of how it's all coming together. So the final piece will obviously be more ambitious, and I'm also going to get back to basics because I want to talk about how budgets are introduced from the Oval Office and then handed to specific committees in a non-binding framework, and then show you how it moves through the committees and ultimately into a full spending bill. And I'll talk about the difference between traditional approaches and the more modern path of budgeting through reconciliation to get around the filibuster and so on. That seems to be the only way that we can do anything in this country is through a reconciliation bill. So I think it's important to understand the details of this so you really know what's at stake, but also how things just got to be this way. So the piece I want to share today, sort of the first entry into this, is what's occurring to me as I continue to read through the bill. And that is how much of a self-inflicted electoral wound this is shaping up to be on the GOP side. So forget about the debt and the deficit arguments, which I'll tackle in the larger narrative. This spending bill is just fucking mean. I mean, it's totally mean-spirited, and it will absolutely rip apart the red states disproportionately. I mean, yes, the working class and the lower end of the economic ladder and significant swaths of the middle class is going to feel it across the board, especially in light of the Trump-induced recession. But if you live in a red state, I'm telling you, man, this is going to be a bloodbath. UNFTR. Here's what doesn't make sense about the GOP's spending bill, HR 1, that is being taken up now in front of the Senate. It takes a sledgehammer to the very communities that are most Republican. So, first off, we're talking about $625 billion in Medicaid cuts over 10 years, hitting places the hardest like Mississippi, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Alabama. These are states that receive 3/4 of federal funding for their Medicaid programs because they're the poorest states in the nation. So I want you to think about that math for a second. Mississippi, as our primary example, receives 3/4 of its Medicaid funding from D.C. 3/4. So when you slash that, where exactly are they supposed to find the money? States can't print money like the federal government. They are constitutionally required to balance their budgets. So they have two choices. They can raise taxes on people who are already struggling or kick families off of healthcare and food assistance, and neither is pretty. So that's why you've seen Republican governors and senators and even some of the Congress people, although not as much, pushing back really hard against their own party's bill. They know what this means to their constituents. I mean, Trump has had to personally go down to the Hill to twist GOP members' arms, threatening political consequences for anyone who doesn't fall in line. But beyond the political consequences, there is a very real human reality and toll behind these budget numbers. We're talking about working parents who can't afford their kids' asthma inhaler, elderly folks choosing between heart medication and groceries, single mothers working 2 gig economy jobs and still can't make ends meet. The bill also cuts $230 billion from SNAP over the next decade. That's food assistance for families where someone is working full-time at, let's say, Walmart or caring for an aging parent with dementia. These aren't people gaming the system. Fraud rates in SNAP are under 1%. These are your neighbors. These are people trying to feed their kids. These are people just trying to cobble together an existence. The administration changes make it worse. Tighter work requirements that don't account for rural job markets. Asset limits that penalize family for having a car or a small savings account. It's like these guys have never met an actual person in the world. But here's the bitter irony. This isn't even about reducing government spending. The GOP is still increasing overall spending. They're just shifting money away from healthcare and food for struggling families toward their priorities, which is cutting taxes on the wealthy. But they don't realize that the social fabric of these communities will fray. Rural hospitals will close. Kids will go hungry. As much as the GOP wants to make fun of that and say that everybody's going to die, people will die. And families will break under the stress. And here's the kicker. All of this creates more need for social services, not less. So when families lose health care, they show up in emergency rooms for basic care, which drives up costs for everyone. When kids go hungry, schools have to step in, or independent fundraisers and nonprofits have to step in, taking more money out of the community to fund meal programs. When people lose housing assistance, homelessness spikes. I mean, we don't know what the point-in-time counts are going to look like, but we had almost 800,000 Americans living on the street last year. What's that going to look like now? 1 million? What's the breaking point for us? 2 million? So these require more crisis intervention and shelters and money. So states end up spending more money on the back end dealing with the chaos that these cuts create. And it's about to get a lot worse. See, Trump's tariff war is already pushing the economy toward a recession. So when unemployment rises and wages stagnate, tax revenues plummet just as families need more help. So states really kind of get hit with a double whammy: less federal support and less of their own revenue to fill the gap. This is how poverty becomes a vicious cycle. Cut the programs that keep families stable, and you create the conditions that push more families into crisis. It's like removing the foundation of a house and then saying, why are the walls cracking all around us? So come election time, voters will remember this. They'll remember who did this to them. But beyond the politics of it, this is just cruel. This is the wealthiest nation in the world. And we're choosing to make life harder for people who are already hanging on by a thread. And the amount of money that they're cutting is technically a rounding error compared to the overall federal deficit and to the overall federal budget and the deficits that we're having to maintain as a result of it. But they just won't cut it from other areas, and they won't increase the revenue commensurate to cover the things that are just basic. And even at their basic level, still not enough. None of this is fiscal responsibility. It's abandoning our neighbors when they need us the most. So the question isn't whether we can afford these programs. The question is whether we can afford to be the kind of country that doesn't have them. Anyway, that's the first kind of political piece that's on my mind that takes real numbers and puts it into the human condition. And I know this is an informal take, but I thought it might be a helpful primer and a way to show how these larger narratives take shape. So until then, I'll see you maybe on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. Go to unftr.com. And at some point, I'll probably have a couple more of these, but then at some point, we'll drop the larger piece on what this budget looks like, how it was put together, and what it really means for the future of the country. Catch you in the next one.